it up to some questions for a few minutes.
Can you plug first?
Yeah.
You can direct your questions to the panel as a whole, or if you have a question for a panelist in particular, you can ask them. Yes, sir. Oh, you know what? I'm going to ask her first because she had a question earlier today.
I don't know why you have not addressed the issue of the child from the time he conceived until he walked into the school the first day of school. Piaget did a study on children and their development. We don't know anything about the development of the child before he reaches school. His exposure to education, what kind of home he's come from. I find that society has been destabilized. And being destabilized, we have a lot of teen mothers. These teen mothers don't know how to structure a home and experiences for their children. You all have said absolutely nothing about that. Now, in the well-to-do neighborhoods, that's not a problem. But in the poor neighborhoods, that's a big problem. Because children come to school, they don't know their name, they don't know their address, they don't know their colors, they can't count, they don't know the ABCs. Time is not on their hand. They have not hands because they have not been instructed to the times of day and doing certain things in the times of day. And then they have been raised by television, a lot of them. But their parents leave the television to entertain their children. I remember once a phrase where they said the children that lived in those high-rise buildings over on Robert Taylor Home were like Valley-Wheel chickens. Now you know what a Valley-Wheel chicken is? It never touches the ground. So these children who live up in these high rises, their feet never have touched the ground before they come out to go to school. These are the experiences that makes learning and teaching so difficult in poor neighborhoods. You have not discussed that issue. Now, you can talk about the issue of the children that go from well-to-do homes and whatnot, that they are well prepared. One time I figured out that there are 168 hours in a week, 7 days a week, as I said. What portion of that is spent in school? And then 5 days a week, they're home with their parents on the weekend. They are with their parents for most of the day. Children from poor neighborhoods, when they come home from school, whatever the teachers taught them that day, parents don't talk to them about what they did in school that day. So that issue, I think, is very crucial, and you have to address that issue. In the poor neighborhoods of children not being prepared to learn. And a lot of them never get prepared to learn the way the school is structured. Now, if they go to Head Start, which, do we still have Head Start? Did they cut it out?
It's still there. Yeah. It's still there.
Okay. And then there's daycare and other little experiences that children can get. And then they're a little bit better, more prepared to go to school than the rest of the kids. That's my issue.
Okay. You're really talking about where I'm coming from. There's a whole range of things outside of what happens in the school that we need to be addressing all the way from birth to work. And there's a tremendous amount of information available that people could be understanding if they were learning from that. I focus on tutoring and mentoring, not just because of the immediate impact it can have on expanding the support system for a kid. I focus on it because it can transform the understanding of adults who don't really know anything about what's going on. If all over the city we were engaging more adults from businesses, from beyond the poor neighborhoods, in non-school mentoring, arts, technology, different kinds of programs, and encouraging learning through that process, then they would understand about generational poverty, they would understand about disparities, they would understand a lot more of these different things, and they would care. We're a soundbite society, other people's kids, random acts of kindness. The parents who go to bat for their kids, and they're invested all the time. There's a lot of kids that don't have enough family support around them to be invested like that. Well, if they don't have someone to stand for, who will? And that's not going to happen by accident. there has to be some effort to engage other adults and to keep them engaged and educate them so they understand a broader set of problems, and they have the kids become their kids in terms of what they're willing to do to try to solve the problems.
And I think it comes down to community as well. And it comes down to, knowing what your community needs and getting to really know the people that you're near, what do they need. I mean, like the school where I work, we have, outreach programs for the type of, students that you're talking about that are raising children themselves and don't have the resources. So there are a lot of times outreach programs. Unfortunately, sometimes by the time I see the students, situations have already happened and we're doing damage control. So what can be done, literally like you were saying, from birth to school in that position. And it's really going to come down to, we're going to have to, as a community, figure out what types of programs work best. How do we teach someone who's alone and young how to structure a home? How do we teach a family to get invested in education and talk to their kids about their homework when they come home? How can we do that? And that's a conversation that really has to include the entire community. The school that the child is going to eventually go to, what can they do to reach out to the younger kids that are eventually going to feed into them? What programs can they create? Can they create a preschool that's going to lead into their kindergarten? Can they create, a daycare system where, they have workshops with the young mothers and the kids? Can they do those things? And that's something, again, that, it could be a money issue. If there's not money to create the program, where's the money going to come from? It would almost have to be, maybe if just some really amazing people in the community volunteer to run a program like that. But then you have to find the people to come and benefit from it, which is another challenge. So it's a definite challenge, and we talk about it at schools all the time. What do I do? Because by the time the kids have gotten to me, so many things have already happened. So what can we do about that period? What can be done to bring those kids in before essentially they start behind? What can we do to start on an even ground instead of trying to catch up with them?
I have a question for Kurt and Jennifer, and picking up and maybe pushing some of the wonderful things I've heard you say already. And Jennifer, I guess I'm thinking of you in the first question, but if you could both respond, that would be great. I'm wondering if you could give an honest evaluation of what it is, what your feeling is about the rewards for teachers. And I'm thinking not just you're being nominated, as you were, for Golden Apple Award, but also the idea of pay for achievement of your students. What your feeling is about that as incentive, as a good model going forward in the way. The other part of my question has to do with teacher empowerment in a different way, which is pushing on something Kurt was talking about. Is it imaginable, is there a model that is workable whereby teachers not only help design, but also begin to control curriculum? So you're not dealing with an entity that creates curriculum and then the teachers are simply delivering it.
Well, as far as merit pay goes, for myself, so that's almost like punishing a teacher who's doing a good job if you're going to base them on the test scores of their kids. Because if you do a fantastic job one year and they're like, oh wow, look at this teacher, they really get those kids that are struggling and they push them and they get them up there and they get them up to grade level. So next year we're going to put them with the lowest performing group of kids. There's only so much you can do before, March when the tests are. So, on the one hand, you do want to be rewarded for doing a good job, but how are you measuring that? If there's a good evaluative tool that's not test scores of your students, if it's something that's growth-based, like let's say something like you track the same set of students within your school for, 3 years. Have your students continued to grow? If you can do some kind of growth model like that, but that would require either the teacher follows the student, like they do in Scandinavia, where the teachers have the same set of students for 4th grade, 5th grade, and 6th grade, and then they start again after a 3-year period. Unless your teachers are going to do that, which means we run into the other problem of now they're switching grades, now they're switching curriculums. So, how do we measure that is my concern. And as far as, teacher designed curriculum, I have designed both of the curriculums that I'm teaching this year myself. And I think that varies from school to school. Some schools will hand you a scope and sequence and say, here you go, this is what you need to be teaching by this month. I feel like Kurt and I kind of have an advantage in the social studies because our state standards are very general. They're not very specific. So, yeah, and they're not on the test. So we also have a little bit more leeway as far as what we can cover when. Curriculum writing is kind of a little pet project of mine. So it's something that I kind of feel that I'm really great at. I work within, our school's networks from, one school to the next, aligning one grade so it feeds into the next. So it's logical from 6th grade through 12th grade. But that varies from school to school. Some schools you have absolutely no curricular freedom. Some schools you have complete freedom. And I don't know if that's a good thing either, to have absolutely no direction, especially if you're an inexperienced teacher who's never taught the course before.
In response to the first part of the question, in terms of evaluation of teacher awards and merit pay specifically, the evidence that has come out on a lot of different arenas, for instance, out of the banking sector, that reverse performance awards that came out and ended up blowing up the economy. So we loot the company now, book future profits now, take the money now, and deal with the after effect later. That's not the model that should probably be applied to schools. And the evidence that it should be applied to schools came out of Atlanta earlier this year, where a huge test cheating scandal erupted that cost the superintendent her job. The psychological research shows that the more you have a winner-take-all system, which seems to be what merit pay is as designed, that you have more and more achieving and that you have less and less collaborative results. The downside of that is that the best evidence for teacher success is collaboration, working with other teachers, developing your craft in a group. So the compensation system is completely at odds with what the best research suggests is the best way to get teachers to be better. So my stance on merit pay is no. That's the way in which it's set up is counterproductive to what we're trying to do. And if we're trying to get the students to be less competitive because collaborative environment is better to learn, then we shouldn't have teachers competing with each other to have higher pay rate. In response to the second part in terms of teacher empowerment, I'm going back to the collaboration model just because the best experience I had came when I worked with another teacher on that model. And where I taught previously, there were two of us who taught an economics class, and after we taught it together for 4 years. And the process was that it saved a lot of things. One, we got much better about writing assessments that could test the students on what they knew, and we could align them with test skills so we didn't have to do direct test prep, but rather we could use our content and a content literacy perspective to say students will learn how to read better by doing economics, and they'll learn the skills of reading, and they'll learn the economics content. We weren't perfect, but we were getting much better about that. It helped a ton with cutting down on the amount of preparation work. It helped a ton to find out ways of, if there was a problem or you had somebody built in to troubleshoot, you could also go and observe, and you de-privatized your practice and you opened it up so that you could actually learn from someone else. And that entire process was really beneficial for me. And where I'm teaching now is that model is starting to be implemented, and it's sort of in the early stages, but even I can tell that it seems that's on the right track and that we're going in that direction. And it's a lot different. Teachers were supposed to be teaching on their own. We're the experts, isolated, and that for me, I don't have any special knowledge. You can come and check me out, and if I'm doing terribly, please tell me so, because I would like to know. And so the more we can get into that model, it seems the better off we're going to be. Now that goes and flies in the face of a lot of what teachers have been trained to do over the years, but it seems like that's the best way to develop curriculum, to control it, to adapt it as necessary for those students that you have in front of you, and to ensure that and to collect data and assess students in ways that don't just test can they learn to read, but also can test problem-solving skills, can test inquiry. You can base it in a way that actually allows students to learn and get interested in learning. So that would be my response.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Yeah, well, I want to address a couple of things that were raised.
Okay, we got one more question, so.
I have a question.
Oh, okay, you're
I have
just
a comment.
commenting? Okay, does anyone have a question before we get a comment? Yes.
Real quick, what do you think of the use of social media in schools? Do you think it's appropriate for teachers to be able to contact the students? Do you think it's appropriate for the students to be able to contact the teachers? Also, what about the children that cannot afford things like computers and stuff like that, that can't afford to get on social media? What do you propose about that?
Let the teachers talk about that.
Well, it's a kind of loaded question. I personally do not believe that I should be socializing with my students via social network. There are some teachers out there who make like a Facebook page for the homework, and it's not socializing. It's just like, you know, here's the homework today, here's the worksheet for tomorrow. But I feel like the fast-paced kind of world, we need to slow down a little bit. Like, I really, especially with my 6th graders, emphasize organization. I emphasize the physical importance of writing something down. Not everything should be a text message. I really feel like school, I emphasize to my kids, and I have 6th graders and 12th graders, school is your job. You are a professional while you are here, just like I'm a professional. And, you know, this is part of your job. And I would never text my boss my lesson plan. It's just not appropriate. I think that it is a problem too, you know, when you come into kids who just don't have the ability, kids who don't have computers, kids who don't have internet access. It ostracizes some students even more. Now, the fact of the matter is, I teach in a low-income school, but I would say 99.9% of my students have Facebook accounts, and 99.9% of them check them on cell phones. So I just feel like it almost makes school and school information seem slightly less important. It also opens you up to a whole host of issues as far as school socializing and, you know, stuff that's inappropriate being posted. I just think that school is meant to be professional, and if we're meant to, you know, educate students for a professional world, I mean, that starts young. I mean, it's a habit. I mean, being a professional is a habit. You don't just wake up one day when you're 22 and graduate college and put on a suit and a tie for the first time and be like, oh, I'm a professional now and I know everything I need to know. It's habits that you acquire over the years of professionalism, and proper speech, and proper body language at work. I mean, those are things that you acquire over years of practice. And we shouldn't ostracize kids that are already underserved when it comes to, you know, academics, like you were mentioning, coming to school. We shouldn't underserve kids even more by ignoring that part of the equation. Like, that's part of professionalism. And not every kid can do it, so I think that's also, you know, an issue. It makes education a lot less personal. Part of it is, you know, coming to the teacher after school one-on-one in a non-threatening way. Being like, I need help on this. You're not embarrassed in front of the other kids. I mean, when I look at several teachers' social media sites where it's meant to be asking questions, there's like one question posted every 3 months. It really puts it out there that you don't know what's going on. And ultimately, kids, especially teenagers, don't want that put on them. They do much better with a one-on-one, come and ask a question nobody knows, you know, and you get the information you need to, and you don't feel socially awkward, I guess. Adolescence is enough of that. So I feel like it adds to professionalism to keep school.
Thank you.
Okay. We're going to have to wrap up. I'm going to get your comment first, and then bring that in.
Okay, I'd like to comment to a number of things that were said. One on the question of privatization. I'm really opposed to that, because I've seen some privatization at the University of Illinois College of Dentistry, and what they do now is they force the teachers to teach only how to do those procedures which sell the products made by the corporation which has taken over. This can be very bad. The other thing is, I was impressed by the President's speech saying that what we need is infrastructure and we need export of manufacturers. Now, I look around. I'm also impressed by this building. America was built by labor. this is labor. I'm sure the educated architects and engineers who set it up were educated. But I wonder just how much education did the men who actually got it made have? Or where did they get their education? Or was it training? And did they get it through the school system? Or they get it through an alternative system known as the apprenticeship system? And would not the apprenticeship system be effective in getting American youth capable of doing these two goals? One, of rebuilding the infrastructure, and two, of being able to make products that we can export to save our economy so we won't all starve to death. And there was another point. I forgot where it was. Let's take somebody else's.
I'm a teaching artist, specifically the blues, and I wondered if anybody, I'm sorry I'm late, and anybody mentioned that there could be some use for arts in the schools and helping with some of these problems.
That wasn't for the,
Is that her mention? Yeah.
No, but
There, I
that's,
remembered what it was. It was a comment about vocational schools and about a tracking system. When I was in high school years ago, we had a vocational tracking system. I wanted to go into vocational school, but they said, sorry, you're from the wrong class, you have to go into college prep. And I'm glad I did. The point is, they directed you according to your social class as to what you were going to do. But the vocational schools were very good vocational schools, such as Chicago Vocational School, down on 79th, farther east, and Washburn Trade School, where men were trained to be able to build those things that we could export that made our economy the biggest in the world, and to be able to build our railroads and our highways and our bridges and all those things. And I think that you can't have all intellectuals. You have to have somebody who's going to get out there and wield the tools and do the hard work, and hire workers and skilled workers and skill. That's my point.
thank you. Back to the art thing, does anyone want to comment on that?
well, I think that again, you mentioned that the number of hours in school and the number of hours out of school, and then we didn't even talk about the summer hours, which were completely out of school. You know, the issue of what's going to happen in those 6 hours in school is under combat from all kinds of different polarizations. But what happens in those hours out of school, a group of people from the church here could say, gosh, we would like to make arts programs and music programs available to the kids in Woodlawn. And you know what? They can do it. They can get the program together, the money together, they can find a place, they can do it. And you know, the democracy of America, the de Tocqueville, people got together, solved their own problems. They built the barns, they worked together.